We're reporting here. Yes, Mr. Big Hat. They call me the Big Cheese Ball. Ross from Xtracycle here, reporting with Pete Priebus and family at Sea Otter, Monterey. What the heck am I talking about? And I'm in another time zone here. No, I'm really excited to be here with you because we have just a kind of an exciting lineup. For those of you who have been following along, well, many of you go way back to like the Free Radical and when we were converting bikes, and that's kind of our diehard kind of like, Pete, I think you started in that world, didn't you? Yeah, so you had one. It was at a beginning stage for a lot of people to get a cargo bike. Now we have this kind of incredible expansion of our line, and I'm going to kind of take you through some of those pieces. So right in front of us here, we have the Swoop, which is the Edge Runner line. So what you can't see about this bike is that it has the 20-inch rear wheel, which is basically brings your rear rack down low. And really, I like to tell people that this bike essentially form follows function. Much like a minivan, you know, it's like you design it to do a certain function. And so for our purposes, we wanted to make a bike that's not for necessarily a bike person, but it's actually for a person who wants to do stuff on a bike. And so you can the most obvious thing right off the bat, of course, is that you can fit a lot of people and stuff on it. But I usually like to start people with actually getting onto the bike because that's usually where we start. And that's the whole key to the Swoop, is actually this really lovely step over. And what I found is that, you know, forever and ever in the bike world, we've thought of a step over, like a lady's bike, is actually like a fashion or a design kind of a style thing, right? So it's like ladies want that. But the reality is it's actually a utility feature. And Xtracycle, of course, is built on utility. And so our thought was, well, hey, you know, we really need, if we're going to make this bike that when you get on it, you can't afford to kick your kid in the head, well, you should probably be able to step through the frame. So it turns out it was actually quite challenging engineering-wise to make a step-through frame, just because diamond frames are usually so typically rigid. But we have been told and found over and over that this particular engineering, we've managed to make it very, very rigid torsionally, which just really for most people, that just means that it's easy to ride, it's stable. So the next thing you probably notice is, of course, the two seats, and that's what, you know, makes this bike shine. But what you don't see under the hood is, of course, that low center of gravity. So if you're going to load something up this much, like literally my neighbor we were just talking about had 4 kids on the back, you're gonna want to have a really strong rear wheel, and you're gonna want to have. So yeah, we can even lift this up here. You can kind of see that rear wheel is tucked under there. It's very strong. It's actually got a lot of benefits that serve the function of this bike, the utility of the bike. So this is kind of the bike that will do it all. You can load up the front, and typically you need to do that if you're going to have all your lunch bags. Usually for me, when I drop the kids off, I've got backpacks and helmets and lunches and everything, because all the back's full of their legs and you don't want them to smush your lunch. So that's kind of that. And then the last thing that I'll point out is a couple of safety features. So we've kind of realized that Xtracycle sort of stands in the place like the Volvo of cargo bikes. You know, it's really like we go for family and safety above all. And so one of the places that starts is a pretty nerdy thing, but for bike people, they would recognize that as a through axle front fork. It's also straight blade and tapered, but it's really made to be for safety. You can see there's a large rotor on there for stopping power. It's got the hydraulic brakes. So that's what we call the signature safety fork, and all those features are true for all of our bikes. It's our commitment to safety is to make that front end the safest it can possibly be. We also put tires that are just roll smoothly and over stuff. Again, that's a safety feature. If you look, of course, as you know well, the Bosch system here, the battery's so hidden, it's kind of often missed. People don't often see the battery. What's really special about this bike is you can get the battery so low that it actually is effectively lowering the center of gravity, so your bike is getting more stable. You can put a second one up on top here if you want to extend your range by double. And of course, Xtracycle allows all of the customization, so you can swap out the different drive units, meaning the motor you can choose, and the batteries for just kind of the bike that's really made for you, right? So depending what you want to carry. But this bike really is intended to set you up like a minivan. If you want to go out for a day, you want to bring your stuff, you want to bring your family with you, and you want to have a great time, that's what this bike is for, the Xtracycle Swoop. I'm really, really stoked. Actually, I was just saying that I don't know if we talked about this, but this is the first time I saw this bike. So today, this is like literally our first one that's arrived, and so it was just like it came together so beautifully. So there's a lot to talk about here, and as you know, Pete, I have a way of kind of like just spewing into your microphone, so I apologize for that. But I don't even know where to start with this bike. So first I'll start with the name. So you can see RFA, that's our acronym, Ready for Anything. And really that gets at the spirit of what we as a brand stand for, which is like, is the mentality and the mind space of saying, you know what, I'm up for that. it's like, I'm stoked, I'm in, let's go. And so for the people who have a mindset that are like, that adventure is fun, that, not knowing what's going to happen along the way, that kind of, again, instead of getting in the safe car and, thinking like, oh, I'm going to be comfortable and it's quiet or it's whatever, it's like, no, we go out in the world and yet we're ready for it. So this bike, as we just talked about the Swoop is like the minivan. We kind of tend to call this like either like a hatchback or like a station wagon in a certain sense. And the reason why you can kind of both of those things is something that we invented called the dynamic drops. So what really identifies this bike that's brand new, patent pending, super exciting development was this, and it's kind of hard to make sense of this. And so you'll have to look online. We'll give you some links to some specifics that kind of highlight how this works. But in effect, what you're getting with this bike is essentially either 2-in-1 or like 7-in-1. But the notion is you can just, if you can see here, we've casted this special part here. I'm going to try to double hand it. Casted this special part, and so if you wanted to, let's say in this current mode, right, it's set up for carrying kids. You got the longer wheelbase, the utility rack on there. It can carry 2 kids, no problem. 1 child seat. What we've got is we've got the ability now to say, you know what, those kids are grown up, and or I'm actually doing more commuting to work and I don't need to carry that much stuff. I'm going to shorten it up. So I go ahead and slide that rear wheel forward. So I pull these bolts out, and the whole assembly, including the brake and the derailleur, move forward. You do have to adjust the chain, so it's not like a thing you would do in the morning and ride in the afternoon, but it is something that, again, when you move from a different phase in life where maybe you're at a stage where you've got kids or you don't have kids, and then you go to having the opposite situation, or like we were talking about earlier, kids move out of the house and now you've invested in a really quality bike, but you aren't going to need all that space. You want to store it in a smaller space. You want a lighter, more nimble ride. This bike can accommodate that. That's why we call it ready for anything. But the last piece that a lot of people don't think about is when we get a little bit older. And so I've been watching my dad as, he's getting into his getting to be 80, and he still wants to ride. He's still active. He loves being outside in Tucson. He loves it, it's a great place to ride. And yet he actually needs a little bit more of the stability that comes from a longer wheelbase bike. So for that purpose, we've actually said, that's the kind of final chapter of the story, the winter of life, or the season of this heirloom bike that's really future-proof and ready for anything, is one where you aren't necessarily carrying anything, but you're actually utilizing the quality, the low step over height, because again, he's not as flexible. So there's this nice design that we've been able to, it's kind of an Xtracycle signature now, kind of bringing these dual seat stays together. That brings all this rigidity and structure to the load handling. So what we're hearing from people is this bike is just super stable. We're just getting just a ton of awesome feedback. But like you see, all of our bikes have this porter rack on there, and so that, again, a great place to store a ton of stuff. The nice thing with this 24-inch wheel is you get a little bit more space for the cargo. Another thing about this bike, again, not to get too nerdy on you, but it's kind of in that spirit of ready for anything. You can see there's actually space in the front and the rear for 26-inch wheels. So if you are going to do more of a kind of a high-speed commute, you could actually set this bike up with dual batteries, a speed motor, which this one has in it, and 26-inch wheels, and you could just roll super fast, cover the miles, and have a kind of just like super fast utility vehicle that you could get around on. And again, like I talked about before, the signature safety fork, so you've got the through axle, you've got the hydraulic disc brakes, just super, super strong and stable. The tire that can just roll over just about anything. So, if you look at like safety statistics and when people kind of tend to get in trouble, it's usually kind of crossing train tracks, and it's like going over a little bit of a lip in a curb is when the average person who knows how to ride a bike, that's when they tend to get in trouble. So we built this bike to just be, like I said, that Volvo of bicycles. It's really about safety. But again, one last thing, we'll come back here. You can see the dual batteries, which is great. But also Xtracycle, we kind of pride ourselves on having really great accessories. So some of the stuff that's neat about this is it's got this built-in rail. So if you wanted to carry panniers, you can just clip your panniers right on there. So right built in, you've got the ability on the utility rack, you can carry 4 panniers, right? Which is not the norm, and yet it's super stable when you do it and really fun. So if you're going to do a kind of an epic trip at some point, you might not do that all the time, right? You might ride this bike to work, yet you'd come home from that and you could still set this up to go on a pretty cool adventure. And again, we were talking about earlier, if you need to get this thing onto a flight, and you need to get it into a box that can fit under a plane, again, you can make this thing a little bit shorter, make it a little bit smaller for, again, just navigating the globe and getting around with the bike. So that's kind of the intro. I guess the last thing I'll say is that's kind of cool is that we've got this is a brand new version of the Hoopty. So it's got these pretty cool padded red rails, our classic, magic carpet, and then the hoopty, we've added these water bottle bosses. So just a couple nice little features that make it really ready for anything. And then this is one of the things that's really cool. Is like we actually we were testing it. We've just this is the first sample that they just confirmed that you can actually fit 2 Yep seats on there. So so I mean, you get this super compact package, but in reality, if you want to load it up, you're just very like incredibly open-ended in terms of what you can do with the bike. So yeah, so two Yep seats. Probably could stuff 3 kids in there, but the thing is that's pretty amazing. So I'll tell you, this is kind of a little anecdote. When we first built this up, like not this one, but the first samples, I was just curious what would happen if we had the long rack on, but we had it in the short wheelbase position. So as a cargo bike nerd, I can tell you that that's like the worst case scenario. It's like you've got this really long rack. It's like the Trek Transport. It was why that bike just totally bombed, because it had a short wheelbase but a really long rack. So I was like, this is not going to work. Like this is totally just like, but I was like, we got to try it, you know. So Steve, product manager, sat on the back, and I literally wheelied going off like as we started to go. But as I got going, it was, and like I really literally I could get out of the saddle. It was so stable. And the point of all that is to say that the literal like structural strength of this bike is so good. It's so like impressive. It's like it actually broke the mold that I had for what I call the tail wagging the dog, which is essentially when you load a bike up with more weight behind the axle. So it's that stable, and that's I just wanted to tell that quick story. This is a new bike in our line for 2019. It's called the Stoker. And the Stoker kind of fits with one of our core values, which is to just like lead from behind, bring the party, be the one who kind of just like, you're loaded up. You're the one who's got like all the party supplies, you whatever it is. It's the keg or the case or the whatever bits of fun, and you know, maybe it's 100 wigs that you're bringing for the party. So this bike is what's kind of sets it apart. It's very much like the Edge Runner platform. It's got all of our same accessory compatibility in the back, so you can see, of course, this huge sort of, I like to call the Shea Lounge, you know, kind of like seating for many, you know, comfortable tushies there. Again, this nice little change here, which we've added. So, you know, there's the bosses, so you can add a water bottle here and one in the front, so both kids can have their own water bottle. But in the end, we basically, you can see all of these, what Xtracycle has defined itself by is all these accessories, the refinement, the simplicity, and just the ease of use, right? So these are the U-tubes. This is where they rest the feet. You know, this is the wheel skirt that keeps, you know, fingers and legs out of the spokes, and the magic carpets and the hoopty. So that's our classic system, really set up not so much for carrying cargo, but for people. And then you know, what's pretty rad about this is we've got, again, the dual battery capacity. But what sets this bike apart is really this kind of I don't know, to me it was like a little bit of a classic throwback to like the mountain bikes of my early, kind of like these more straight tubes, and just kind of an homage to like those early, this fun bikes that we rode before they got so swoopy, and so, you know, it's like it's just this chromoly. It's super strong and stable, and yet it's kind of got this suppleness to it. It's got all this really nice triangulation for strength, but really what sets this bike apart is just the two 24-inch wheels that are really nice and knobby and grippy. But so you get this kind of effect of almost like a cycle truck up front. So it's like you're not going to get the small 20. I just am really not a big believer in using 20-inch wheels on the front of bikes. I think that they're just, it's not ready for anything. It's a great sort of very, very niche kind of application of a tire, but I think for most people riding in diverse conditions are not going to be happy with a 20-inch front wheel. So we feel like the smallest you want to go on the front wheel is that 24, again with a fat tire on there. And so we've set it up so with both the rear wheel. But what's kind of cool about this is we envisioned it, you know, so when you took the Edge Runner, it had a 20-inch rear wheel, which of course gets you all those advantages of the lower deck height. But what it also did is it brought the derailleur so close to the ground. And what we realized is we wanted this bike to be ready to go off-road. A lot of people are really excited about the kind of the sub 24, you know, going out for the ride, camping out and coming back, and sometimes bringing the kids bikes. It's a really, really kind of aspirational journey we see a lot of our people in our community do. And so we wanted to set this bike up so that really you could ride off-road with a lot greater ease, right? But still retain that sort of built for cargo sort of orientation. So that's why you've got these two 24-inch wheels with the fat tires, lots of cargo space, but really a super fun, high quality electric, you know, cargo bike. That's the Stoker. Okay, so basically of the bikes we've covered, the first one was the Swoop, the blue one. That one starts at sorry, $44.97. So basically $4,500 for the base unit with electric assist. The same for the Stoker, so $44.97, and then the starting point for the RFA Sport, so the short version with the Sport rack is $4,000. It's basically $39.99. We have, Xtracycle.com. You can search for Stoker, Swoop, or RFA, so those take you to some specialty pages, or you just go to Xtracycle.com. Yeah.
And how can we get one of those Team Issue hats?
Oh man, well this is 101. Hey, shout out to the Sombrero team. Yeah. So first of all, you have to go to Tucson and you have to go to the Hattery, I think it's called, Glenn and Campbell. No, but I had to form this under the steam on our stove. So if you want this particular hat, I'm gonna need to give you a hand. But this was stitched on by my lovely wife Shannon. So yeah, 1 out of 1. You can't have it. No. Hey, all right, give it up. Yeah, Tucson. Nice.